The warp, a realm of raw, unbound energy, a mirror of the material universe shaped by thought, emotion, and chaos. To the uninitiated, it is an ocean of nightmares, a kaleidoscope of shifting horrors that defy logic and reason. Yet, for humanity and the Imperium, this treacherous void is indispensable. The warp serves as the lifeblood of interstellar travel, enabling the colossal distances between stars to be traversed in days rather than millennia. It is both a gift and a curse, a perilous frontier that has claimed countless lives. The Imperium's mighty warships and merchant vessels, with their gargantuan hulls and powerful Geller fields, venture into this hostile dimension. Each journey is a calculated risk, as the warp is alive with entities and dangers that hunger for the souls of the living. Even the best prepared vessels can falter, losing their bearings, their crews, or their very existence to the whims of this merciless expanse. Ships entering the warp are not guaranteed to emerge unscathed, or at all. Stories of vessels vanishing into the warp are as ancient as humanity's first attempts at interstellar travel. Some are said to emerge centuries later, crewed by shades of their former selves. Others reappear as derelict hulks, lifeless and adrift, bearing marks of horrors beyond mortal comprehension. Most, however, are never seen again. These are the lost ships of the Imperium, an ever-growing fleet of phantoms whose fates remain shrouded in mystery. For the countless billions who live and die under the banner of the God Emperor, the loss of these ships is a tragedy, a blow to the might of humanity. Yet for the scholars, explorers, and heretics who dare to question the official accounts, these disappearances are a puzzle to be unraveled. What happens to a ship when it is lost in the warp? Do they fall prey to the predations of demons? Do they become trapped in eddies of time, forever looping through the tides of eternity? Or are they transformed, irrevocably altered by the malevolent energies that saturate this accursed realm? The warp does not relinquish its secrets easily. Those who dare to investigate often pay the ultimate price. Yet the allure of its mysteries persists, driving the curious and the desperate alike to seek answers. Understanding the fate of these lost ships might illuminate the true nature of the warp itself, a goal that could offer salvation or bring ruin to all who dare to reach for it. As we begin this exploration into one of the darkest enigmas of the 41st millennium, consider this. The warp does not simply take. It changes, consumes, and reflects the souls of those who enter it. And in that reflection, one may find horrors more profound than death. The drama of ships lost in the warp unfolds across multiple levels of the Imperium, involving a diverse array of participants, each playing a vital role in the fateful journeys that lead to their disappearance. At the core of these events are the ships themselves and their crews, bound together by purpose and necessity as they venture into the turbulent immaterium. Commanding these vessels are Imperial captains, individuals forged in the crucible of war and discipline. These figures are the linchpins of the Imperium's vast interstellar operations, tasked with navigating not only the perils of the material universe, but also the treacherous currents of the warp. Captains are supported by their command crews, who assist in critical decision-making, from tactical maneuvers to interpreting omens of danger. These leaders carry the burden of ensuring the survival of their ship, knowing full well that failure could mean oblivion for themselves and those under their command. The heart of these ships beats within their navigators, specialized mutants descended from ancient lines blessed or cursed with the ability to perceive the warp. These unique individuals pilot their vessels through this volatile dimension, their psychic third eye attuned to the elusive Astronomicon, a psychic beacon emanating from Holy Terra. Their task is fraught with peril. A single miscalculation can plunge the ship into warp storms or worse, condemning all aboard to a fate worse than death. Equally essential to the operation of these vessels are the tech priests of Mars. Members of the Adeptus Mechanicus, they maintain the machine spirits and oversee the intricate systems that enable ships to survive the warp's hostility. Their expertise in maintaining Geller fields, a protective bubble shielding the ship from the warp's malevolent forces, is paramount. Without the Mechanicus, even the most resilient Imperial warship would be reduced to little more than a drifting coffin, vulnerable to the predations of entities lurking in the Immaterium. Among the rank and file are the crew members themselves, an often overlooked but indispensable part of every ship's function. These millions of souls represent the Imperium's vast diversity, hailing from countless worlds and strata of society. They operate weapon systems, manage cargo holds, and keep the engines humming through the long warp passages. For them, the journey through the warp is an act of blind faith. Few understand the true nature of the dimension they traverse. Their lives are bound to the success of the ship's mission, whether it is transporting supplies, carrying troops, or engaging in warfare. Imperial ships are rarely unguarded, especially in wartime. They carry detachments of the Astra Militarum, or the Adeptus Astartes, ready to respond to any threats that emerge during their journey. These warriors serve as both defenders of the ship and enforcers of discipline, ensuring that order is maintained even in the most desperate circumstances. They represent the Imperium's martial might, ready to turn their weapons on both external enemies and internal dissidents. However, not all who play a role in these journeys are loyal servants of the Imperium. Rogue traders, with their chartered independence, often operate in the warp's fringes. They may accompany Imperial fleets or pursue their own interests, guided by a mix of ambition and curiosity. Unlike the rigidly disciplined naval officers of the Imperium, rogue traders are often willing to take risks others would avoid, their decisions driven as much by profit as by duty. Finally, lurking on the periphery are those who oppose the Imperium, directly or indirectly influencing the fate of ships lost in the warp. Chaos cultists, heretics, and even demonic entities view Imperial ships as prey, their influence often manifesting as sabotage, psychic interference, or outright possession. The warp is their domain, and any vessel entering it must contend with their insidious presence. These actors ensure that every journey through the Immaterium is fraught with tension, as unseen hands manipulate events to their advantage. This tapestry of individuals and factions shapes the narrative of what happens to ships lost in the warp. Each has a distinct role, and their interplay determines the ultimate fate of these vessels, whether it be survival, disappearance, or transformation into something far removed from their original purpose. These players stand as both the architects of their destinies and pawns of forces far beyond their comprehension, making the mystery of the lost ships a deeply human and profoundly tragic drama. The foundation of Imperial space travel lies in the immense scale of humanity's dominion across the galaxy. The Imperium spans millions of star systems, each critical to the survival of its colossal machinery. This vast expanse created an insurmountable challenge, maintaining communication, supply lines, and military coordination across such an immense territory. Ordinary methods of travel were insufficient, as even the fastest sublight speeds would take centuries to traverse the distances between stars. The need for a solution drove humanity to embrace the dangerous and unpredictable dimension known as the warp. The origins of warp travel date back to humanity's ancient expansion during the Dark Age of technology. During this time, humanity first discovered the Immaterium, a parallel dimension that exists alongside the material universe, shaped by emotions and psychic energy. This discovery promised to revolutionize space travel, as ships could enter the warp and emerge light years away in a fraction of the time required for conventional travel. This potential made the warp indispensable, even though its dangers were immediately evident. The rise of the Imperium after the Age of Strife solidified the warp's role in interstellar travel. The galaxy had become fragmented and isolated during this chaotic period, and the reunification of humanity required rapid and reliable movement across vast distances. The Emperor's establishment of the Astronomicon, a psychic beacon visible to navigators, allowed ships to navigate the warp with a degree of precision previously unattainable. This innovation transformed warp travel from a desperate gamble into a calculated risk, enabling the Imperium to grow into a galaxy-spanning empire. However, the warp was never tamed. Its nature is inherently volatile, a roiling sea of psychic energy influenced by the emotions of living beings. Warp storms, unpredictable disruptions in its flow, could render entire sectors inaccessible for centuries. The Great Rift, a catastrophic tear in reality, exacerbated these dangers, making travel even more treacherous. These environmental hazards became a constant threat to every vessel daring to traverse the Immaterium. The necessity of warp travel ensured that Imperial ships continued to venture into this realm despite its perils. Supply runs to distant colonies, reinforcements to embattled war zones, and exploratory missions into uncharted regions all demanded passage through the warp. The Imperium's insatiable need for resources and territory further fueled these voyages. Planets rich in minerals, agricultural worlds to feed countless billions, and archaeotech relics from humanity's golden age all lay scattered across the galaxy, accessible only through the warp. Compounding these logistical demands were the Imperium's enemies. Xenos threats, chaos incursions, and internal rebellions created a constant need for swift military deployment. Naval fleets and transport ships carrying millions of troops were dispatched through the warp to defend or reclaim Imperial territories. The high stakes of these missions often meant that expeditions were launched despite unfavorable conditions, as delay could spell disaster for entire worlds. The immense size and complexity of the Imperium also created administrative challenges. Orders from Terra often took years to reach their destinations through the warp, resulting in delayed responses to crises. This disconnect pushed sectors and fleets to act independently, relying on the warp to execute their plans without awaiting central approval. The resulting decentralization sometimes led to miscommunications and poorly coordinated movements, further increasing the risk of ships becoming lost. Lastly, the Imperium's unyielding doctrine and reliance on faith played a significant role. The cult of the God Emperor teaches that every sacrifice is a service to humanity's survival. This ideology drives countless individuals to undertake perilous warp journeys with unwavering conviction, trusting in the Emperor's protection. Even when faced with catastrophic odds, these ships press forward, believing their mission is part of a divine plan. The convergence of necessity, ambition, and faith ensured that the Imperium would remain bound to the warp, despite its inherent risks. These forces created a relentless push into this hostile dimension, setting the stage for countless tales of ships that never returned. The consequences of this reliance would ripple across the millennia, leaving behind a legacy of both triumph and tragedy for those who dared to brave the Immaterium. The journey of an Imperial ship into the warp begins long before its massive engines roar to life. These vessels, some as large as cities, must first prepare for the monumental task of entering the Immaterium. The process involves meticulous planning, ritualistic adherence to protocol, and the coordination of thousands or even millions of personnel. Every detail, no matter how small, can mean the difference between a successful voyage and complete annihilation. Preparation starts with mission directives, which are handed down from the Imperium's vast and labyrinthine bureaucracy. Whether the ship's purpose is to transport troops, carry supplies, or engage in combat, its orders dictate every aspect of the journey. These directives often originate from distant sectors or even Holy Terra itself, with messages encoded and carried across the galaxy through astropathic relays. The relay of these orders ensures that the ship's mission aligns with the Imperium's broader strategic needs, though the delay in communication can sometimes lead to outdated or incomplete instructions. Once orders are received, the ship undergoes extensive maintenance and provisioning. Tech priests and engine seers from the Adeptus Mechanicus inspect and bless the vessel's systems, ensuring the machine spirits are appeased and operational. Critical components, such as the warp drives and Geller fields, are tested and sanctified. Any malfunction in these systems during the journey could lead to catastrophic consequences. Simultaneously, the crew works to load the ship with the supplies needed for the voyage: food, ammunition, spare parts, and in many cases, human cargo in the form of soldiers or colonists. The selection and preparation of the crew are equally vital. With millions of souls aboard larger ships, maintaining order and discipline is a monumental task. Chain of command briefings, training drills, and inspections ensure that every individual understands their role and can perform their duties under the strain of a warp journey. Morale is addressed through religious services and the chanting of prayers to the Emperor, as faith is considered an essential shield against the Immaterium's corrupting influence. Before departure, the ship gathers in a mustering point, often at the edge of a star system. These locations are chosen for their relative isolation and proximity to stable warp routes. Here, the vessel might join a convoy or fleet, as traveling in numbers offers increased safety against external threats. Escorts, such as frigates and destroyers, take up positions around the larger ships, creating a defensive perimeter against potential attackers. The fleet's formation and coordination are carefully calculated to ensure efficiency and mutual protection. With preparations complete, the ship approaches the warp entry point. These points are not random but carefully charted routes, known as warp corridors or Mandeville points. Such locations are chosen for their relative stability within the Immaterium, minimizing the risk of immediate exposure to warp storms or other hazards. The ship's navigator studies the astronomican and other psychic markers to confirm the route is viable. Once all calculations are complete, the order to activate the warp drive is given. The moment of transition into the warp is both awe-inspiring and harrowing. The ship's Geller field activates, creating a protective barrier that shields the vessel from the Immaterium's malevolent forces. The warp drive tears open a rift between the material universe and the Immaterium, propelling the ship into a dimension of swirling, chaotic energy. The transition often causes unsettling phenomena: flickering lights, disembodied whispers, and fleeting glimpses of impossible shapes outside the ship's hull. For the unprepared, this moment can be overwhelming, but for seasoned crews, it is simply the beginning of their perilous journey. Once within the warp, the ship becomes entirely reliant on its navigator and Geller field. The navigator, using their psychic abilities, charts a path through the shifting tides and currents of the Immaterium, seeking to avoid its many dangers. Meanwhile, the Geller field must remain stable at all costs. Any failure of this protective shield would expose the ship and its crew to the warp's predatory entities, resulting in certain doom. Despite all precautions, the warp is inherently unpredictable. Even the most carefully planned journey can go awry due to unexpected phenomena: the sudden appearance of a warp storm, interference from malevolent entities, or mechanical failure. The success of the voyage depends not only on preparation, but also on the ship's ability to adapt to the ever-changing dangers of this hostile realm. Each moment in the warp is a gamble, one that countless Imperial ships have lost over millennia of perilous travel. The pivotal moment for ships lost in the warp often arises from a single defining failure or decision. This moment determines whether the ship and its crew can return to real space or become permanent residents of the Immaterium. The key event typically centers on the breakdown of one or more critical systems that allow the vessel to navigate or survive the warp's hostile environment. It is this moment of failure or decisive action that seals the fate of countless Imperial ships. The most common cause of a ship becoming irretrievably lost is the catastrophic failure of the Geller field. This energy barrier is the only defense against the warp's predatory entities and corrosive influence. When the field falters, even for a fraction of a second, the Immaterium's horrors seize the opportunity to invade. Diamonds, entities composed of raw warp energy, breach the ship's defenses, slaughtering or possessing the crew. In many cases, this breach marks the immediate end of the vessel as it is consumed entirely, leaving no trace. Another critical point is the miscalculation or incapacitation of the ship's navigator. These individuals guide vessels through the warp by interpreting the Astronomicon, a psychic lighthouse that provides direction. Navigators operate under constant psychic strain, and their mental resilience is critical to the success of the voyage. A moment of distraction, a sudden psychic assault, or the interference of a warp storm can overwhelm a navigator, causing them to lose their bearings. Without a clear path, the ship drifts aimlessly at the mercy of the warp's unpredictable tides. Warp storms themselves are another common cause of loss. These phenomena can erupt without warning, enveloping ships in waves of chaotic energy that disrupt systems, tear apart hulls, and scramble the minds of the crew. Captains facing such storms must make impossible decisions, whether to press forward, risking total destruction, or to attempt to drop out of warp space, an action that can be equally perilous if the ship materializes within a star, asteroid field, or other hazards. In some cases, the pivotal moment is rooted in internal strife. The warp preys upon the fears, ambitions, and hatreds of those aboard, amplifying these emotions to dangerous levels. Mutinies, sabotage, or psychically induced mass hysteria can erupt, leaving the ship in chaos. A breakdown of command structures or open rebellion among the crew often coincides with the collapse of critical systems, leading to a chain reaction of failures that ends in disaster. Decisions made by the ship's leadership also play a significant role. Captains and senior officers are often faced with difficult choices, such as whether to divert course to avoid detected anomalies or press forward to meet a critical deadline. In their desire to fulfill their orders or prove their loyalty to the Imperium, some commanders gamble on risky routes or ignore warnings from their navigators or tech priests. These decisions, while made with the best intentions, often lead directly to catastrophe. In rarer instances, external forces influence the ship's fate. Attacks from warp predators or the interference of malevolent entities can drive a vessel off course or overwhelm its defenses. These entities, ranging from demons to ancient, incomprehensible warp-dwelling creatures, are drawn to the psychic energy of Imperial ships, like moths to a flame. A single encounter with such a force can spiral into a series of events that ultimately doom the ship. The pivotal event may also involve unintended consequences of seemingly minor actions. Small misalignments in the warp drive, unnoticed damage to the hull, or overlooked rituals during the ship's blessing can manifest as catastrophic failures once the vessel is deep within the immaterium. These incidents, often preventable in hindsight, highlight the precarious nature of warp travel and the thin line between survival and destruction. Ultimately, the defining moment for ships lost in the warp often comes down to an interplay of factors: mechanical failure, human error, and the inherent unpredictability of the immaterium. Once a ship crosses this threshold, its fate is sealed, and it joins the countless other vessels that have vanished into the warp, leaving behind only questions and fragments of their stories. This moment is the final turning point, a decisive instant that determines whether a ship will return to the Imperium or remain forever in the clutches of the immaterium. The loss of Imperial ships in the warp creates ripples that extend far beyond the immediate disappearance of the vessel. These events are not isolated incidents, but rather catalysts for a cascade of consequences that touch every aspect of the Imperium, from its military strength to its political stability and even its spiritual doctrine. Each vanished ship leaves behind gaps, challenges, and uncertainties that the Imperium must address, often at great cost. First and foremost, the disappearance of a ship represents a direct loss of resources. Each vessel embodies a significant investment of time, materials, and manpower. The construction of these colossal starships, often spanning decades, involves the labor of countless workers and the sacred rituals of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The loss of even a single vessel, therefore, weakens the Imperium's logistical and military capacity. This is particularly devastating in wartime, where the absence of reinforcements or supplies can mean the difference between victory and annihilation for entire planetary systems. The human cost is equally profound. Millions of lives can be extinguished in a single incident. These losses are not just numbers, but include soldiers, specialists, and civilians, each playing a vital role in the Imperium's survival. The disappearance of colonists bound for new worlds, for example, can stall the development of key settlements, while the loss of entire regiments of the Astra Militarum can leave vulnerable planets undefended against enemy incursions. Every vanished ship weakens the Imperium's ability to project power and defend its territory. The psychological and spiritual impact of these losses is felt across the Imperium. For the families and comrades of those aboard, the disappearance of a ship is a source of profound grief and uncertainty. Unlike battles where the dead can be honored, those lost in the warp are often presumed irrecoverable, their fate shrouded in mystery. This absence of closure fosters an atmosphere of fear and superstition, further deepening the Imperium's reliance on faith and the Emperor's guidance. Clerics and missionaries often seize upon these events to emphasize the dangers of straying from the Emperor's light, using them as cautionary tales to reinforce devotion. On a broader scale, the loss of ships in the warp undermines trust in the Imperium's ability to safeguard its citizens. This is particularly true in regions where these disappearances are frequent, such as along unstable warp routes or near the edges of the Great Rift. Entire sectors can become paralyzed by fear, their populations reluctant to engage in trade or exploration. This hesitation exacerbates the already staggering inefficiencies of the Imperium's bureaucracy, further straining its ability to govern. The military implications of these losses are particularly dire. The Imperium's enemies, both external and internal, are quick to exploit any perceived weakness. A world left undefended due to the loss of its reinforcements can quickly fall to invasion or rebellion. Chaos warbands, Xenos raiders, and other opportunistic forces often prey on regions destabilized by such disappearances. These predations force the Imperium to divert resources from other fronts, creating a domino effect of vulnerability that stretches across multiple sectors. The mysterious nature of warp-related losses also fuels paranoia within the Imperium. Accusations of heresy, sabotage, or incompetence often follow the disappearance of a ship, particularly if it carried sensitive cargo or high-ranking officials. Inquisitors, tasked with rooting out corruption and treachery, frequently launch investigations into such incidents, their findings sometimes revealing dark secrets that further destabilize the region. The fallout from these inquiries can lead to purges, political upheavals, and even the execution of entire shipyards or planetary governors deemed complicit in perceived failures. Finally, the loss of ships in the warp contributes to the growing body of myths and legends surrounding the Immaterium. These stories, though often exaggerated or distorted, serve as a grim reminder of the warp's power. Tales of ghost ships, vessels emerging centuries after their disappearance, or crews corrupted by unspeakable horrors are shared across the Imperium, further embedding the warp's sinister reputation into the collective consciousness of humanity. These accounts, while fascinating, also perpetuate fear and misinformation, complicating efforts to maintain order and stability. The immediate and far-reaching impacts of these losses demonstrate how integral warp travel is to the Imperium and how vulnerable it remains to the dangers inherent in its use. Each vanished ship leaves a void, not just in physical terms, but in the morale, strength, and cohesion of the Imperium itself. These absences are a stark reminder of the precarious balance that humanity must maintain to survive in a galaxy defined by chaos and conflict. One of the most intriguing aspects of Imperial ships lost in the warp is the phenomenon of their reappearance, often under circumstances that defy conventional understanding. Tales abound of vessels emerging from the Immaterium centuries or even millennia after their disappearance, their arrival shrouded in mystery and horror. These occurrences fuel endless speculation and debate within the community of scholars, fanatics, and storytellers who seek to unravel the secrets of the warp. A common thread in these stories is the distortion of time within the immaterium. The warp is a realm where linear time does not exist, and the flow of moments can accelerate, decelerate, or loop back on itself unpredictably. Ships have been known to return with their crew unchanged, unaware that hundreds of years have passed in the material universe. In other cases, vessels reappear aged and decrepit, their hulls corroded and their interiors eerily abandoned, as if centuries had passed in both realms. One particularly infamous example of this phenomenon is the appearance of ghost ships, vessels that materialize in real space with no living crew aboard. These derelicts are often found adrift, their systems mysteriously functional, but their human inhabitants long gone. Investigations into such ships reveal unsettling details, hastily scrawled warnings on bulkheads, signs of violent struggle, or cargo holds filled with the remnants of strange rituals. Some theorize that these crews were consumed by the warp itself, while others suggest that they succumbed to madness or demonic possession. Equally perplexing are the instances in which ships re-emerge fundamentally altered. These vessels bear the marks of their time in the immaterium, with hulls twisted into impossible shapes and surfaces etched with incomprehensible symbols. Their interiors become labyrinthine, with corridors that lead nowhere or loop back on themselves, defying spatial logic. Such ships are often quarantined or destroyed by the Imperium, their existence deemed too dangerous to investigate further. The condition of returning crews adds another layer of fascination. Survivors of warp-lost ships often exhibit profound psychological trauma, their accounts filled with fragmented memories of incomprehensible events. They speak of voices that whispered in the dark, of shadows that moved with a life of their own, and of companions who vanished without explanation. In some cases, the survivors themselves are altered, displaying unnatural physical or psychic traits that defy medical explanation. These individuals are often executed or taken into custody by the Inquisition, their stories suppressed to prevent panic. Another unique aspect is the emergence of vessels that seem to have been claimed entirely by the warp. These ships, often referred to as damned vessels, operate as if under their own volition, appearing unexpectedly in war zones or near strategic Imperial installations. They are invariably hostile, their weapon systems turned against their former allies. Some are rumored to carry crews of demonic entities, while others appear to be piloted by the spectral remnants of their original crew. These ships are seen as a grim reminder of the dangers of the immaterium and the ultimate price of failure. A less understood but widely discussed phenomenon is the supposed sentience of ships that have spent extended periods in the warp. There are accounts of vessels that seem to act with intelligence, reacting to external stimuli in ways that suggest autonomy. These living ships are a source of endless speculation, with theories ranging from the influence of malevolent warp entities to the awakening of their machine spirits. Whether these ships are truly alive or merely tools of the Immaterium's capricious will remains an open question. The artifacts recovered from lost ships also fuel curiosity and debate. These objects, ranging from personal effects to pieces of the ship itself, often bear unusual properties. Weapons may hum with an unnatural energy, documents may contain cryptic messages, and fragments of hull plating may radiate a cold that cannot be explained by natural means. Such items are highly sought after by rogue traders, heretics, and collectors, despite the risks associated with their possession. Lastly, the topic of how and why some ships are chosen by the warp to be lost while others survive continues to inspire discussion. Theories range from purely mechanical explanations, such as fluctuations in Geller field strength, to metaphysical ideas involving the collective will or emotions of the crew. Some speculate that certain ships are targeted by warp entities for reasons known only to them, while others are merely victims of chance in the chaotic tides of the Immaterium. These unique aspects of Imperial ships lost in the warp add layers of mystery and horror to an already perilous reality. They highlight the fragile line between survival and destruction, offering glimpses into a dimension where the rules of existence are rewritten and where every journey carries the potential for profound and irrevocable transformation. Among the countless tales of Imperial ships lost in the warp, certain individuals stand out, their actions and fates etched into the grim history of these events. These figures, whether celebrated, reviled, or pitied, reveal the human dimension of the warp's horrors. Their strengths, flaws, and decisions often define the outcomes of these tragic voyages, offering a glimpse into the resilience and frailty of humanity when confronted with the Immaterium's boundless dangers. One such figure is Captain Malathor Vectress, a naval officer renowned for his unyielding resolve and tactical genius. Vectress commanded the Resolute Will, an Imperial Navy cruiser tasked with reinforcing a beleaguered sector during a Xenos incursion. Known for his ability to maintain composure under pressure, Vectress inspired loyalty among his crew, who trusted his leadership implicitly. However, his determination to fulfill his orders at any cost also became his downfall. When a warp storm engulfed the fleet, Vectress chose to push forward rather than retreat, believing his faith and discipline would see them through. Though his ship vanished without a trace, survivors from other vessels in the fleet reported seeing the Resolute Will locked in a desperate battle with shadowy entities before disappearing entirely. Vectress remains a symbol of courage, but also of the perilous fine line between valor and hubris. Navigator Cassia Tharlin, a rare prodigy among her kind, was lauded for her extraordinary psychic sensitivity. Her ability to chart precise courses through the warp earned her a reputation as a near-legendary figure within the Navis Nobilite. Tharlin was often sought after by high-ranking officials for critical missions, and her insights saved countless lives. However, her heightened abilities came at a price. Cassia was plagued by vivid nightmares and intrusive visions of the warp's horrors, a burden that took a toll on her mental state. On her final voyage aboard the harrowing Star, Tharlin reportedly attempted to communicate with an unknown presence in the Immaterium, believing it to be a guiding force. The ship was never seen again, and her story has since become a cautionary tale about the dangers of venturing too deeply into the psychic mysteries of the warp. Tech priest Dominus Ferren Ictus of the Adeptus Mechanicus was an enigmatic figure known for his obsession with the machine spirits of ships that had survived extended warp journeys. Ictus believed that these vessels possessed unique insights into the Immaterium, and he sought to unlock their secrets through exhaustive study. Assigned to the Augur of Truth, a fleet repair ship, Ictus took part in an expedition to salvage derelict vessels drifting near the Great Rift. When the ship encountered a massive warp storm, Ictus attempted to enhance the Geller field with forbidden technologies recovered from the salvaged wrecks. While his modifications initially appeared successful, the Augur of Truth vanished shortly thereafter. Rumors persist that his experiments inadvertently attracted the attention of malevolent warp entities, dooming the ship and its crew. Ictus is remembered as a brilliant yet dangerously ambitious figure whose relentless pursuit of knowledge led to catastrophe. Sister Superior Carida Valen of the Adepta Sororitas is another name intertwined with the fate of warp-lost ships. A warrior of unshakable faith and fiery conviction, Valen led a detachment of battle sisters aboard the transport vessel Eternal Vigil. Tasked with escorting a relic of great significance, Valen's contingent became the ship's spiritual anchor when the warp began to infiltrate its defenses. Witnesses described her as a beacon of hope, rallying the terrified crew with hymns and prayers to the Emperor. Despite her efforts, the ship succumbed to an unknown force, its final Vox transmissions filled with the sounds of battle and Valen's unwavering proclamations of devotion. Her fate remains unknown, but her actions continue to inspire stories of resilience in the face of overwhelming darkness. Another notable figure is Lieutenant Kalen Strivok, a junior officer whose resourcefulness became legendary following the mysterious disappearance of the Morning Blade. Stravok's journal, recovered years later from a derelict wreck, provides a rare first-hand account of life aboard a ship lost in the warp. His writings detail the crew's descent into paranoia, the haunting phenomena they experienced, and his desperate attempts to maintain order. Stravok's final entries suggest he made a desperate gamble to stabilize the ship's Geller field, though the details of his actions remain unclear. His words, raw and unfiltered, have become a harrowing testament to the human cost of warp travel, immortalizing him as both a tragic figure and an unlikely hero. The enigmatic rogue trader Verena Kylos also holds a unique place in these tales. Kylos, known for her daring ventures into unexplored regions of the galaxy, reportedly sought out ships lost in the warp, believing they held treasures and secrets beyond imagination. Her ship, the Lament's Reach, was last seen entering a warp storm in pursuit of a derelict cruiser. Kylos' reputation for cunning and audacity has led many to speculate that she survived, continuing her operations from within the Immaterium itself. While her ultimate fate is unknown, the legend of Verena Kylos serves as a reminder of the fine line between ambition and recklessness in the face of the warp's infinite dangers. These individuals, each marked by their unique qualities and circumstances, illustrate the diverse ways in which humanity confronts the enigma of the warp. Their stories, whether of triumph, tragedy, or mystery, offer glimpses into the resilience, courage, and fragility of those who dare to venture into the Immaterium. The loss of Imperial ships in the warp has given rise to countless theories and unresolved questions that continue to captivate and divide scholars, commanders, and fanatics alike. These mysteries are woven into the fabric of Imperial culture, providing fertile ground for speculation, myth-making, and endless debate. One of the most perplexing questions is whether ships lost in the warp are truly gone forever. Stories of vessels re-emerging after centuries, often warped beyond recognition, raise the possibility that time itself functions differently within the Immaterium. This has led to speculation that some ships may still exist in a suspended or altered state, waiting to return to real space. Are these vessels trapped in temporal loops, reliving the same moments endlessly? Or are they slowly navigating the Immaterium, guided or manipulated by forces beyond comprehension? The lack of consistent evidence leaves these questions unanswered, fueling both hope and fear. Another debated topic concerns the role of the Geller field and its potential limitations. While it is widely understood that the field provides essential protection against the warp's predatory entities, there are incidents suggesting that even active fields may not be entirely impenetrable. Some theorists argue that particularly powerful warp entities or massive disturbances can breach even the most robust defenses. This raises unsettling implications. Are some ships lost because their Geller fields failed, or because the Immaterium itself evolved to circumvent their protections? If so, what does this mean for humanity's reliance on this technology? The nature of ghost ships remains one of the most controversial and mysterious aspects. Ships reappearing in real space without their crews pose a profound enigma. Theories abound as to what happens to the people aboard these vessels. Some suggest that they are consumed by warp entities, leaving the ship itself untouched. Others propose that the crews are transported elsewhere within the Immaterium, perhaps as unwilling participants in some malevolent scheme. A more unsettling possibility is that the crews remain aboard but are rendered invisible or immaterial, existing as echoes trapped in a liminal state between dimensions. One of the most heated debates revolves around the influence of the warp on a ship's machine spirit. Many believe that prolonged exposure to the Immaterium can corrupt or even awaken the machine spirit, turning it into a malevolent entity. If true, this raises the question of whether some ships are lost due to internal rebellion, with their systems actively working against the crew. This theory is supported by anecdotal accounts of ships seemingly sabotaging themselves or behaving in ways that defy logical explanation. However, skeptics argue that such stories are the result of stress-induced paranoia rather than evidence of sentience. The phenomenon of recurring or replicated ships has also sparked widespread discussion. There are reports of the same vessel appearing in multiple locations simultaneously or returning to service long after being declared lost. These sightings often come with discrepancies, identical hull markings yet wildly different histories. Some theorists suggest that the warp creates echoes or duplicates of these ships, fragments of their existence scattered across time and space. Others argue that these are deliberate manipulations by warp entities, using familiar forms to sow confusion or lure victims into traps. The influence of unknown warp entities on these disappearances remains a major point of contention. While demons are the most frequently cited culprits, there are hints of other, less understood forces at play. Some researchers speculate that there are entities within the Immaterium that operate independently of the Chaos Gods with their own inscrutable motives. These beings may view Imperial ships as tools, experiments, or simply curiosities, manipulating their fates for reasons that humans cannot comprehend. This theory suggests that the warp is far more complex than the Imperium acknowledges, with layers of interaction beyond those dictated by chaos alone. Another enduring mystery is the nature of the so-called damned fleets, collections of ships that supposedly operate autonomously within the warp. These fleets are said to consist of vessels lost over millennia, bound together by shared circumstances or the influence of powerful warp entities. Accounts of these fleets often describe them as marauding forces emerging from the Immaterium to wreak havoc before vanishing again. If these fleets exist, questions arise about their composition, purpose, and whether they act of their own volition or under the control of some greater power. Finally, there is the question of whether some disappearances are deliberate. Could certain ships be lost due to sabotage, betrayal, or even intentional abandonment? Rogue traders, inquisitors, and even members of the Adeptus Mechanicus have been accused of engineering such events to cover up heretical activities, dispose of rivals, or acquire forbidden knowledge. If true, this would mean that not all lost ships are victims of random chance or warp phenomena, but pawns in a much larger game of power and survival. These unresolved questions and theories underscore the profound uncertainty surrounding the fate of Imperial ships lost in the warp. They highlight the limits of human understanding and the vast, uncharted complexity of the Immaterium. For every answer, there seem to be countless new mysteries, ensuring that this topic remains one of the most fascinating and debated in the Imperium's long and tragic history. The long-term consequences of Imperial ships lost in the warp ripple through the galaxy, shaping the Imperium and the balance of power across millennia. These disappearances are not merely isolated tragedies, but indicators of deeper systemic vulnerabilities that could lead to significant changes, both positive and negative, in the future. The most immediate and pressing consequence is the erosion of the Imperium's military and logistical infrastructure. Every lost ship weakens humanity's ability to maintain its dominion over the galaxy. Over time, this cumulative attrition places ever-increasing pressure on existing fleets and supply lines. If the rate of losses continues unchecked, entire sectors could find themselves cut off, leaving them vulnerable to rebellion, invasion, or collapse. This slow disintegration could eventually push the Imperium into a state of irreversible decline, unable to sustain its vast territories or respond effectively to emerging threats. On a broader scale, the phenomenon of lost ships underscores the inherent fragility of warp travel, which remains the cornerstone of the Imperium's interstellar connectivity. If no advancements are made to mitigate the risks of traversing the Immaterium, humanity's reliance on this dangerous method could become its undoing. The growing prevalence of warp storms, particularly following the creation of the Great Rift, suggests that these dangers will only escalate. Without significant innovations or alternative methods of travel, the Imperium's long-term survival is in jeopardy. Yet, there is a potential silver lining to this crisis. The increasing frequency of warp-related losses may compel the Adeptus Mechanicus to pursue new technological breakthroughs. Historically, the Imperium's rigid adherence to tradition has stifled innovation, but desperation has occasionally forced even the most dogmatic institutions to adapt. The development of more reliable warp navigation systems, enhanced Geller fields, or even entirely new methods of faster-than-light travel could emerge as a response to these losses. If such advancements were realized, they could revolutionize interstellar travel, strengthening humanity's position and reducing the dangers of the immaterium. The cultural and psychological impact of these disappearances also has far-reaching implications. The fear and uncertainty surrounding the warp have already entrenched a culture of superstition and unwavering faith in the Emperor. As losses mount, this could deepen humanity's dependence on religious dogma, stifling scientific inquiry and fostering an even greater divide between faith and reason. On the other hand, a growing awareness of the Immaterium's mysteries could lead to a cultural shift, encouraging a more pragmatic approach to understanding and navigating its dangers. Another long-term consequence is the potential for lost ships to resurface in ways that reshape the galaxy. Vessels that reappear after centuries in the warp often carry knowledge, artifacts, or individuals whose presence can alter the course of history. For example, the return of a long-lost fleet bearing forgotten technologies or military assets could dramatically shift the balance of power in a given region. Conversely, ships emerging corrupted or controlled by warp entities could introduce new threats, destabilizing entire sectors and forcing the Imperium to divert resources to contain them. The legacy of lost ships also serves as a stark reminder of the Imperium's precarious existence and the cost of its hubris. Each vanished vessel represents a failure to fully comprehend or control the Immaterium, highlighting humanity's limitations in the face of a hostile galaxy. This lesson, if internalized, could foster greater caution and humility in Imperial policy, potentially curbing reckless expansion and encouraging a focus on consolidation and resilience. Alternatively, it could fuel a more aggressive, fear-driven approach, with the Imperium doubling down on its militaristic and authoritarian tendencies to compensate for its vulnerabilities. The fate of lost ships also has implications for the Imperium's relationships with other factions. Rogue traders, Xenos, and heretical groups have all been known to exploit these disappearances, scavenging derelict vessels for resources or using them as tools for propaganda. Over time, this could exacerbate existing tensions and spark conflicts that further strain the Imperium's resources. On the other hand, collaborative efforts to address the problem, such as joint salvage missions or shared research into warp phenomena, could foster alliances, however unlikely, that might provide temporary reprieve in an increasingly hostile galaxy. Finally, the cumulative effect of these losses on the Imperium's historical and cultural record cannot be understated. Each vanished ship takes with it countless stories, documents, and relics that represent irreplaceable pieces of humanity's collective heritage. Over time, this loss of knowledge and history diminishes humanity's ability to learn from its past, leaving future generations to repeat the same mistakes. Preserving what little is recovered from these disappearances becomes ever more critical, ensuring that the sacrifices of those lost are not in vain. In the grand scheme of the 41st millennium, the issue of lost ships represents both a symptom of the Imperium's decline and an opportunity for transformation. Whether this crisis ultimately leads to renewal or ruin depends on humanity's ability to confront its limitations, adapt to its circumstances, and find strength in the face of an uncaring galaxy. The long-term significance of these losses lies not only in their immediate effects, but in the lessons they offer to those willing to heed them.